Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. You're all very welcome. So today, what I want to talk about, as Simon said, is about audience transformation. And by that, what I mean is how people's behaviours have changed as a result of the pandemic, and why it's fairly important for businesses to focus on this specific area going into a fairly uncertain future. Now, before I get into it all, remember, if you have any questions or anything you want to raise today, if you could please tweet us with the hashtag #ArdmoreLive. We'll answer as many as we can in the Q&A session at the end or over the next coming days. So I want to talk about audiences, and the reason for that is I'm the planning director here at Ardmore, and my role here is very much about people. So working with our clients to understand their customers or reaching new customers through fairly constant research and insight. And those researched insights inform and fuel our advertising campaigns to really connect with people that we're trying to talk to. So I want to talk about people today. But first, I want to talk about change and I suppose the consequence of change. Kate touched on, I suppose, the sort of the media publicity of all of this. So for a bit of context, it's been widely documented that, we've all read about it, as especially as business owners and stakeholders, you're experiencing the change firsthand. But the problem with the vast number of articles, opinions, and perspectives on this change is that you have a lot of people with a lot to say, and some of it for you will be relevant, but some of it perhaps not so relevant. And the challenge for any given business is knowing what to distill from all of this, so you can tailor a future-proof strategy going forwards. You need to know what's going to work for your business and your unique set of circumstances. And that is why I believe the most reliable source of information to learn from is actually your customers themselves. And that's what I want to talk about today. And with that in mind, what I want to talk about is two key things. First of all, I want to talk about the extent of the changes people have experienced. So how the sudden change in our world has meant we've had to adopt new behaviours like these. And I'm sure you can all personally relate in some way to these images and how they've almost become a new way of living in these unique circumstances. But it's important to note that although the situation has been profoundly tragic, that not all change has been viewed as negative. In fact, only 9% of people in the UK actually want life to return to exactly the way it was. So thinking about those positive byproducts that we've all seen over the last 4 months, things like spending less money, cleaner air outdoors, a stronger sense of community, and actually catching up with friends a bit more, even having been in lockdown. So to talk about the changes isn't enough. To really understand the changes that are going to last, we just need to look beyond the change itself, and which brings me to the next thing I want to talk about, which is arguably more important, and that is the human motivations behind all of these changes. So what motivated us to adopt to these changes when our lives moved inside? Why did our shopping habits change almost overnight? Why is technology all of a sudden taking on such a central role in our lives? And why is there just a lot more empathy towards one another and even from corporate brands? So that's the second bit I want to talk about. But back to the first part for now, identifying those prevalent changes. So at Ardmore, to understand the behaviours has meant intensive and global consumer research. And for this work, here you can just see some of the touch points we've been listening to and collaborating with. I mentioned them before, but obviously we are shareholders with Worldwide Partners. That's a global network of agencies that we represent here in Northern Ireland. And it's these guys who we've been sharing and collaborating with daily to get trends and insights from parts of the world that have been at different stages of the pandemic, and that's feeding into what you're about to see. They've literally given us that exclusive future view on the unpredictability of the situation. So the following is largely based on some standout insights from an exclusive piece of research that they commissioned, but also includes findings from these other touch points. So let's get into it. The first one I want to talk about was that irrespective of your circumstance, it seems that we were all at some stage forced to evolve. We all had to find out how to do things that we hadn't done before. And naturally, in modern society, when we don't know something, we gravitate to Google. So with that in mind, what we can see is that searches prefixed with "how do I" at the beginning of lockdown had been at an all-time high worldwide. And that saw a 500% increase in the UK after lockdown. But right now, what we're seeing with lockdown measures easing, search prefixes are starting to shift to "near me" or "what's open near me" as people get ready for the return. So Google's been a really important bellwether to understand how people are being forced to evolve. So that's one of the first things. And in terms of retail, it's no shock that habits have changed. So I just want to talk about that for a bit. And for me, one of the retail insights that goes relatively underlooked was the significant spike in premium purchases during lockdown. Almost 1 in 2 25 to 44-year-olds in the UK have bought what I call a replacement premium item since lockdown. I suppose what I mean by that is replacing a usual basic item in the shopping basket with a premium version of the same item. So if you think of Taste the Difference in the supermarket, or Ralph Lauren if you're shopping for clothes. So what we did when we saw that was we dug a bit deeper into the reasons as why people made the switch. The top reason stated for this was that they just wanted to treat themselves, and beneath that, it was about compensating for niceties that were currently unavailable. So it wasn't a question of cost. It was actually about finding ways and means to stay positive and happy in the essential shopping routines. Staying on the theme of buying, and something you're going to hear more of today, is the astronomical rise in e-commerce. I just want to talk about that at a local level, because in Northern Ireland alone, the behaviour has seen a dramatic increase that transcends age. So over 40% of 55 to 44-year-olds in Northern Ireland say they will spend less time in stores after lockdown. And almost the same number of the same group of people say that they will actually buy more for online delivery or collection. So it's really important that we don't necessarily listen to the general typecasting anymore. It's not going to fly for businesses. The ease, it's risk-free, it's direct to door, and the control of choice means that it's no longer an option for customers. It's just the expected way of getting things. So moving on to socialising, I suppose, and globally, social media users increased more than 8% since April last year. And the figure across all platforms on social currently sits at about 3.8 billion people who are currently connected through social media. And tying into that is something that you'll probably be familiar with, and that's been referred to as the Zoom boom. And by the end of December 2019, Zoom, the video conferencing platform, had about 10 million daily users. And by March, it was about 200 million. In the same month, so March 2020, the app was downloaded more times than Netflix. So irrespective of whether you believe it's a blessing or a curse, the bottom line is that 39% of people in the UK say they've been catching up with friends and family more as a result of video conferencing. Really important trend. And then moving on, this is around how, I suppose, immersive technologies brought the outside inside for an awful lot of people around the world. So as schools and concerts and museums and landmarks closed up and people sort of moved inside, they turned to getting their dose of education, their dose of culture from virtual experiences. And examples of this are live concerts via Twitch, personal training sessions on Instagram Live, and in retail, specifically in the Asia region, loyal customers are being actually invited on to these online spaces for VIP access to new products. So now social media is the obvious manifestation of how customers get this type of information in the online space. And with a forecast that global social media penetration will actually surpass 50% by the end of the year, this has got to point to the trend becoming salient on other sectors. We predict travel and tourism is going to see this virtual experience boost, and more in the retail sector as well. Back to buying, and this is one we can all relate to, which is about when local became global. So when it became to buying local as a behaviour, the first thing that it's important to remember that even prior to the pandemic, we were already seeing a growing trend towards buying locally produced food. The importance of sustainable practice, ingredients, and in many cases, less food miles were all positives to buying local. The current situation has just exacerbated it. And as it stands in the UK today, 6 in 10 people are making a concentrated effort to support and buy local since lockdown. But this has been as much of a consumer push to all those benefits as a brand pull. Local businesses have been really smart. In the early stages of the crisis, more agile local businesses, and you may have experienced this firsthand, had a unique ability to connect with their customers and their communities with this touch of personality and empathy that larger retailers potentially took longer to mobilise on, if they ever did at all. And then the final trend I want to talk about, and perhaps this is the most poignant of consumer behaviours that has been amplified over the last 4 months, has been this positive global outcry of social activism. So before the pandemic, the world was already experiencing fairly unprecedented levels of mass mobilisation. But when the world moved inside and the news agenda changed, issues connected to the pandemic and even foreign to it brought activism to new audiences who found new ways to be heard. So Flatten the Curve, Black Lives Matter, those movements garnered global support that have pushed society to have these conversations about collective priorities with a message that transcends COVID-19. So those are prevalent behaviours that have occurred as a result of the pandemic. However, as I said before, I want this also to be about understanding the motivations behind those changes. And in order to do that, I need to apply a fairly tried and tested principle. And for this, I'm using Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's old, it came about in the 1940s, and it's been used countless times by countless businesses since to try and explain or simplify human behaviour, and we're going to use it today. So in summary, and explaining it really, really quickly, every person has a series of needs in life. And once you're fulfilled in one of those, you then seek out the next. So you move up stages. So at the bottom level here, it's about the basic needs. It's about food, it's about shelter, warmth, as well as the feeling of safety and security. And then once you have those things, the focus turns to the psychological needs. And by that, what I mean is it's about social connection with friends and family. And it's about personal success through education, career, and relationships. And then finally, once we're satisfied at that level, our focus turns to self-fulfillment. So this is about getting the most out of life. Hobbies, sports, passions, connecting with new cultures and experiences to enrich our lives even further. The reason I'm showing this is pre-pandemic, for most of Western society, the basic needs at the bottom were largely taken care of. For those people, it was about the top two tiers: strengthening friendships, getting away to new places, getting ahead in a career, and just generally doing what we love. But the arrival of the coronavirus completely reset this way of life and this order for everyone. What it did was it brought our instincts and mindsets essentially right back down to the most basic of human needs again. And this impact is reflected and has been reflected in our behaviours. So our basic needs have been about ensuring that we not only have what we need to survive, food, drink, hand sanitizer, face masks, but also what can make us feel positive. So comfortable clothes, exercise equipment, and those premium items that I mentioned before. The psychological needs have been about maintaining connections with others who we missed. So, as I mentioned before, this has been enabled via video calling technologies such as Zoom and Skype. And in addition, our career status has been replaced with building our own self-esteem through promoting those values that we care about deeply on social media platforms, such as social distancing, government advice, and more recently, and as I mentioned, Black Lives Matter. Aligning behind a shared global purpose to feel a sense of collective belonging is really what this middle bit has been about. And then finally, the self-fulfillment stuff has come from personal vows that we've made to ourselves and goals to make the most of the situation. So challenging ourselves to lose weight, for example, acquiring new skills, new languages, and even supporting frontline workers and buying local, as I mentioned before. So whether we've noticed it or not, all those popular behaviours all came from deep-rooted motivations that were all reset because of the crisis that we experienced. But I suppose the key question is, why is all of this important to a business? Well, if you bring back those behaviours that I touched on earlier and drop them onto this model of human motivation, it really lets us simplify a whole complex situation. The behaviours I touched on all align to stages of motivation. Now, the reason that this is important is that the motivations that created these behaviours are the constants, the all-important constants, instincts that are hardwired into us all. So when I said customers are the most valuable source of information, this is what I'm talking about. In business, if you can build your strategy around these motivations, there is no question you will cope and you will grow by better satisfying your customers' needs. And I know I'm here to talk about audiences, but we're already seeing businesses resetting to cater for these fundamental needs. So beyond brands, and Kate mentioned this before and you'll hear about it again, heavily investing in user-friendly e-commerce solutions, we're seeing things like ambient wellness up in the top here, which is a return to normal bricks and mortar shopping and service, but with enhanced safety and self-care built right into the customer experience as standard. We're seeing interactive shopper experiences, something that's really taking off in South Korea already. And brands supporting social activism, especially in the US, connecting with consumers via shared purpose. And even what are referred to now more commonly as dark stores. These are closed retail outlets used to assist with easier local delivery options via click and collect. Kate was talking about this before. So these are just a few examples of how retail is pivoting to these human motivations. So to close up and get sort of back on elaborating on the point I'm trying to make here is I'm going to quote someone who adopted the same belief back in 1997. And this is the founder, CEO, and president of Amazon, Jeff Bezos. And when he was asked about what was going to change in the next 10 years, he said, I almost never get asked the question, what's not going to change in the next 10 years? And I submit to you that that question is arguably the more important one, because you can build a business strategy around things that are stable in time. So Bezos is obsessed with constants, because in business, it's there where he can focus and continually prove how Amazon works. He knows his customers are always going to want more value for money, more choice, more relevance, quicker delivery. Those are motivations that will never change, have never changed. And it's through refining his business against these and ignoring a lot of the hype, he has become the richest man in the world. So it's a good quote to try and back up the point that I'm trying to make. So in summary, I suppose what I want to leave you with is hopefully some comfort that although the changes that we've seen from consumers are all varied and unique, they're all grounded in a series of fundamental motivations that haven't changed in humans for absolute centuries. And I mean, at Ardmore, we live and we breathe this understanding. We're helping clients build or even rebuild businesses, business strategies to connect with consumers. And yes, technological advancements have enabled us to adapt through connecting brands and consumers quicker. But remember, the motivations, the needs are the key to growth. And as history has proven, and actually Kate already touched on, times of crisis are also times of opportunity and innovation, especially in retail. But it's the solutions that truly help people without any burden, without any compromise, and those are the ones that are going to have the real staying power. So I hope that you've found some value in that, and thank you for listening.